So a long time ago on my Instagram, you should follow me by the way, posted a tier list of every megaten game I've played up until that point. I've since deleted that post for two reasons. One, my opinions have changed drastically from that last post. And two, I've played more games since then, so I figured this would be a good opportunity not just to rank the games I didn't in that list, but also to reevaluate my opinions on the ones I did. These are the games that I played. If there's any game that isn't in this queue, that means I either haven't played it, or it's a different version of a game already on here. For games with re-releases like Strange Journey and Persona 5, I chose my preferred version to have on this list. I of course made an exception for Persona 3 FES and Persona 3 Portable because they're very different games. One thing I want to mention before I start is the only bad tiers in this list are E and D. Anything higher than D I more or less enjoyed. And also that this list is just my opinion, and if you disagree with my takes, that's perfectly fine. Just don't be a dickhead about it. But with all that out of the way, let's start ranking the games, starting with the first Shin Megami Tensei game. Honestly, for the first game in the series, this game is actually pretty fucking good. Going into this game for the first time, I was expecting it to be really grindy and not fun to play because of its age. But to my surprise, this is probably the least grindy game in the series. I swear, whenever you beat a boss in this game, you level up like 38 times. Not to mention, this game is pretty fucking easy. This game's balance is completely ripped in half with the use of things like nerve bullets, bufu skills, and ZL skills, because their stun effects work every fucking time, so you can just infinitely stun lock the bosses in this game until you win. This may sound like I'm complaining, and like, yeah, it isn't very good game design, but honestly for me, that's what makes the game fun in its own weird fucked up way. The story of this game is also really good. The contemporary setting and the alignment system do wonders for this game's atmosphere and tone. And for such an early SNES game, there are a lot of cool set pieces in this game, like the bomb going off after you beat Senator Thorman. I know those are stuff that the entire franchise is known for, but this shit probably kicked ass when it first came out. And the music, even though each song lasts like 10 seconds, is still really damn good. However, despite what I like about this game does have a few issues. For starters, opening up the map is a chore to do because you have to navigate a whole ass menu for it, and this game is borderline unplayable without a guide. Which I can forgive because a lot of games from this era are just made to be played with a guidebook, but with everything taken into consideration, I think a B tier works nicely for this game. Even though it's got problems, I still enjoy it, and it was a great foundation for the series. Shin Megami Tensei 2 I would probably put in B as well, but above the first game. If you played SMT1, this game is pretty much more of that, but improved upon. You can now open the map with the click of a button, which is so much more convenient. And the UI and overall visuals received a significant facelift, making menus easier to read and dungeons easier to navigate. This game also does a much better job at telling you where to go, at least in my experience. Stun locking has also been more or less patched in this game, although guns completely break the mid-game in half. And the story, honestly, I thought I liked SMT1's story better, but after thinking about it for a while, I think SMT2 has the better story out of the two. The atmosphere isn't quite as charming as the first game, but it more than makes up for it with its story, characters, and music. Not to mention, Aleph has got to be the most interesting protagonist in the mainline series. I really enjoyed this game. It's pretty much an improvement over the first game in almost every way. If you liked SMT1, then you'll probably like this one. SMT-if, more like SMT-F. Yeah, this shit belongs in E tier. I fucking hated playing this game. This is basically SMT1 and 2, but in an alternate timeline where the developers just had a stroke while making it and started spazzing all over their keyboard and then just called it a day. I have nothing good to say about this game, dog. The gameplay is a direct downgrade of what came before it. Your allies can't use their basic attack if they're in the back row, even though it let you in the previous games. And I know this is nitpicky of me, but I also don't like how they made bullets a finite resource in this game when it used to be infinite uses. I don't know, for me that was just something that was really hard to get used to. Not to mention this game has the world of Sloth, by far the most miserable, grindy, horribly designed dungeon I've ever had the displeasure of playing in my entire fucking life. And the Guardian system is a cool concept, but the way it's handled in this game is complete trash. The story isn't good either. I don't care about any of the characters at all except for Hazama, I guess. But the story's pretty much non-existent until the end, and even then it's just Azuma may have killed all these people, but he was sad. Wah wah. And like, the music is good, yeah, but it's literally nothing but reused tracks from SMT 1 and 2. Literally the only good thing I can say about this game is that I'm glad it exists because it laid the groundwork for Devil Summoner and the Persona series. But if that's literally the only point of praise I have for this game, I think I have the right to put it in the bottom tier. Alright, let's talk about Nocturne. This was my first non-Persona Megaten game, and boy, what a great first impression. I loved this game so much when I first played it. I'm pretty sure in my old tier list I had this game in S tier. But recently, and by recently, I mean like 3 months ago at the time of this recording, I replayed the game to see if I still liked it as much as I did when I first played it. And to be honest, like, yeah, I still think this is a great game, but it does have a lot of issues. Mainly the dungeons. There's a lot of good ones in here, but like, those underground cave dungeons are just really fucking annoying and not fun to play and are a huge waste of time. Same thing goes for the Labyrinth of Amala. I don't know if it's just me, but that place feels completely AI generated. But other than that, the dungeons in this game are really solid and a decent challenge. The gameplay itself is also really good. This is the first Megaten game to have the press turn battle system, which is my favorite, like, video game mechanic, just, like, of all time. It rewards you for being good at the game and punishes you for being too reckless, while allowing for so much flexibility during battles. The ambient music of this game does a lot for this game's environments, and does a great job at selling the tone. And the story is what I would call simple yet effective. The characters and plot are kinda non-existent in this game, which led every Megaten fan on Twitter into believing that SMT is focused around gameplay and isn't about story. But like, I don't know, it's good. It did what it needed to do without much filler, and I can respect that. And besides, this game more than makes up for it with its absolutely beautiful cutscenes. I swear, this game looks fucking amazing for a PS2 game. I may not be crazy about Nocturne like I was back then, but I do still think it's an amazing, well-crafted game, and I'm thankful it exists because it's what got me into the larger Megami Tensei franchise. Strange Journey I would probably put an A as well. This has to be the most unique entry in the mainline series. With its diverse cast of characters, its orchestral soundtrack with all the chanting in the background, the setting being a black hole in Antarctica, everything about this game is super unique and unlike anything that came before it. The same goes for the gameplay. The alignment of your demons matter more in Strange Journey than any other game in the franchise, because the more demons of the same alignment are in your party, the more damage you do in battle, which I think is such a cool idea and really makes you think hard about your team composition. The dungeons are also really fun and challenging and well designed. Sector E isn't that hard, by the way. The cast and story are also just so great and memorable. Jimenez has to be my favorite Chaos character in the series. Zelenin is a law character I actually care about, and the neutral ending honestly got me all misty-eyed. My favorite part about this game though has to be the bosses. Each and every one of them had me thinking outside the box and trying out brand new strategies I otherwise wouldn't even consider, and it made me feel like a fucking genius when I beat them. Especially the game's final boss, Mimalef, who will wipe the fucking floor with you in one turn on your first attempt. But after figuring out what to do with her, she becomes fairly straightforward, and it's such a rewarding feeling. So I bet a lot of y'all are thinking, wow, you sound like you really love this game. Why don't you have it in S tier? Well, the thing is, I find myself wanting to revisit this game a lot less than the other games on this list. And it's mostly due to the game's difficulty. This game is genuinely hard. A lot of people like to gas up the difficulty of these games and say some dumb shit like, SMT is the Dark Souls of JRPGs. You're corny and annoying if you say that, by the way. But like, once you figure out the meta of all these games, they're actually pretty fucking easy, especially SMT1 and Nocturne. Strange Journey is the only game in the series that I think truly lives up to its reputation of being difficult, and because of that, it makes me want to replay this game less than the others. Now, I am not saying difficulty is a bad thing. Absolutely not. Some of my favorite games are DMC3 and Hollow Knight. But because of how genuinely challenging this game is, it's something I have to be in a specific mood to revisit, if that makes sense. When I have an itch for a challenge that just needs to be scratched. Nonetheless, Strange Journey is an amazing game that is more than worthy of the A tier. I went with the DS original for this list because I played Redux before it, and between the two, I enjoy the original a lot more in terms of gameplay, story, and art direction. Alright, this is an easy one. Shin Megami Tensei 4 is my favorite video game of all time. This is a perfect video game in my eyes. Every single thing about this game complements each other so well to make this one incredible experience that I will never forget. The battle system is an improvement over Nocturne in almost every way. It's faster, it's more engaging, it's more immersive. Sure, smirking sucks sometimes, but honestly it's not that big of a deal. The exploration in this game is so easy to get lost in the zone just running around collecting relics and avoiding demons. This game also has the best story, the best characters, and the best atmosphere out of the mainline series, and without a doubt, my favorite soundtrack in all of gaming. Ryota Kozuka is an absolutely legendary composer who still has yet to have a single miss in his entire discography. Everything about this soundtrack just serves to amplify the oppressive atmosphere of this game and really makes you feel like you're Flynn and exploring this uncharted territory for the first time. On that note, the atmosphere of Shin Megami Tensei 4 is simply amazing. It feels lived in and alive, yet so desolate and lonely. And it's really easy to just get completely immersed in this game's world. The side quests in this game are genuinely fun, and unlike other games, I actually care for their bite-sized stories. The story is by far the best and most interesting out of the mainline games. A lot of people like to say that it's just a rehash of SMT1, and while I see where they're coming from, I personally feel like this is the last SMT game that tried to do something unique with its narrative. I love how this game tricks you into thinking that this is yet another fantasy setting JRPG in the beginning. But then the cracks start showing and you get to see what the game really is little by little. And after that point, it is a wild ride full of plot twists and moments that really make you question your current morals and views up until that point. Like the passage of ethics and the reverse Hills arc, for example. I just love this game's themes of reincarnation and the endless cycle of suffering and sadness that comes with it. Now I know that was some edgy ass shit that I just said, but trust me when I say it is handled very well. The amount of content this Nintendo fucking 3DS game has is honestly impressive. I've played this game 5 times and I still find new shit to this very day. Shin Megami Tensei 4 is my favorite video game of all time. You all owe it to yourselves to experience this masterpiece at least once. This game defines the entire Megami Tensei franchise in my eyes, and also defines me as a fan of the series. And then 3 years later, Shin Megami Tensei 4 Apocalypse comes out, and just pisses all over everything that made SMT4 so good. This has got to be the worst writing to ever come out of an Atlus game, bro. This game just feels super edgy to the point of coming off as tryhard and cringy. The characters are fucking terrible too. Toki is probably the worst character to ever exist in the entire franchise, and quite possibly in all of gaming. Solely made to appeal to the sweaty basement-dwelling neckbeards who play these games, bro. This game takes place during the neutral ending of SMT4, which is already bad enough because that ending is probably the worst part of that game. But this also means that the returning characters are completely ruined. Flynn gets his cock sucked by everyone in this game. Isabeau has been turned into a complete nothing burger. She doesn't have the amazing and compelling character growth she had in the Law and Chaos paths of SMT4. Nozomi was completely butchered from how she was in 4. And I genuinely believe that Navarre and Asahi could have been great characters. They had a lot of good going for them, but are just ruined by this game's shitty ass writing. And to be completely honest, like, this game wasn't so bad in the first half, but once Toki gets introduced, the story just completely stops making sense and being good. And as a follow-up to my favorite game of all time, I really want to put it in E so badly, but here's the thing. While the story is easily an A tier, the gameplay and music are fucking godlike. Just saying right now, this game has the best gameplay in the entire franchise. As much as I hate this game for what it is, at least I had fun playing it, I guess. But I'm someone who values story and gameplay equally when it comes to story-driven games. And unfortunately, the absolutely fucking objectively terrible writing hurts this game a lot, so I'm putting it in the lowest ranks of the C tier. SMT5 goes in C tier as well for similar reasons. The story has the opposite problem to Apocalypse. While Apocalypse just has so much fucking shitty ass writing going on, SMT5 has absolutely nothing going on in the plot. The story of this game just feels like there is a good 80% of the plot just straight up missing. Literally, Dazai is the only character in this game. Miyazu and Yuzuru do absolutely nothing throughout the entire story, and the game wants you to care about them so much. I see some people say that they just need to add another story arc in between the 3rd and 4th areas and then it would feel complete. But to me, that couldn't be more wrong. There's so much about this game that can really benefit from just having stuff added to the plot. This game just reeks of it being a first draft. I feel like they made the plot non-existent on purpose because they were trying to make the game like Nocturne. I mean, it's very apparent, bro. The Maladrum and Magatsuhi are in this game and the conception is just straight up mentioned. But I feel like they missed the point of what made Nocturne's simple story so good to begin with. Nocturne's story was simple by design because the main appeal of that game was the desolate atmosphere and the fight for survival with the challenges the game throws at you. SMT5 just feels like, hey, people like Nocturne, right? It's because Nocturne was non-existent, right? Yeah. But the thing I hate most about this game has absolutely nothing to do with the story at all. It's this game's artificial ass difficulty. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, basically, let's say you're level 39 fighting a level 40 boss. You will do nothing but tickle the boss's balls with a feather while they completely obliterate you with one Agi. But let's say you come back and you're level 41 fighting that level 40 boss. The boss will not stand a fucking chance, dog. You will instantly win. Like, I'm sorry, but am I the only one who finds that to be shitty design? One of the most appealing things about these games is that you can play these games at your own pace. One of my friends recently played SMT4 for the first time, and he started the Lucifer fight in the game, underleveled and underprepared, and still persevered. One of my other friends recently played Strange Journey, and he beat fucking Memalef with nothing but a squad with different Jack Frosts. SMT5 pretty much forces you to grind to get through the game whether you like it or not because of the way the level scaling works, and that's just such a letdown, and I hope they get rid of that shit in the next game. But other than those issues, the game is fine. Exploring is probably the best part about this game. It's really fun and even relaxing at times. Demon Essences is such a fun and flexible mechanic, and I hope they keep it around. Reverse Compendium Fusion is a godsend. The music is absolutely amazing, but it's by Ryota Kazuka, so of course it is. The game is visually stunning, even though it runs like dick on the Switch. Overall, the game's fun, but has fatal flaws in both gameplay and story that hold it back tremendously. Only reason why I'm putting it slightly above Apocalypse is because it isn't a follow-up to my literal favorite game of all time. It's just trying too hard to be like another. Okay, finally done with mainline, now I can talk about the spin-offs, starting with Devil Summoner Soul Hackers. I'm pretty sure on my old list I put this game in B tier, but I recently replayed the game and I just thought to myself, wow, how the fuck did I let myself get away with putting it in fucking B? This game is amazing. As far as the classic megaten formula goes, you know, the first person dungeon crawling with 2D visuals type shit, this is the absolute peak of that in my opinion. Some people prefer Strange Journey or SMT2, but for me, nothing beats Soul Hackers. The dungeons are the perfect amount of challenging. Not insanely difficult like Strange Journey, but not actual baby mode like SMT4. Every dungeon has a gimmick that's super unique and fun. Yes, even the Amami Monolith. Come on, it's not that hard to figure out. The battle system, while very simple and straightforward, is super fast-paced and satisfying to play every single time. And not to mention, I just love the vibe of this game, bruh. This is gonna sound mad corny, but this game is 90s as fuck. It's just got that vibe of an old school anime like Ghost in the Shell or Serial Experiments Lane. Combine that with an absolutely killer soundtrack this game has, and you got an atmosphere that's super memorable. It's just got that right amount of cheesiness to it, and it's somewhat endearing. I love this game's plot from start to finish as well. It starts out super lighthearted like a Saturday morning cartoon, but over the course of the game it starts getting darker and darker, and honestly I teared up at something that happens. This is just a really fun little game. It is a short and sweet game. It took me like less than 20 hours to beat, but I enjoyed every second of it, and it definitely earned its spot on the S tier. Devil Summoner Raidou Kuzunoha versus the longest fucking video game title ever. I put it in D. I didn't really enjoy it that much. Raidou is a fucking baller ass protagonist, and the 20s Tokyo setting is super cool and unique for the series. But other than that, this game just isn't anything to write home about. It's not an objectively horrible video game like SMT If, but it's certainly not great. I wouldn't say it's bad, it's just bare bones and slow. This is an action RPG, and the combat is super limited in what you can do. I can deadass count the things you can do in battle in this game on one hand. The level design of this game is also nothing special, and the encounter rate is abysmally high. I don't know, I didn't find this game to be unplayably bad, I just found it really, really boring. Though the story is pretty neat. Again, nothing amazing, but it's a nice little story that I enjoyed. Narumi, Tei, Rasputin, and Goto are also fun characters. It's got some decent music too, even if it gets a little repetitive at times. Raidou 2, on the other hand, I feel comfortable giving a high C tier. The story is much better, the cast is much better, shout out to my man Don. Music is much better, the dungeons are much better, the battle system is more fleshed out, and you can actually do a lot more in it than just the 5 things you can do in one. Not to mention they up the spectacle of the boss fights by a lot in this game, and it makes things way more epic and satisfying. But despite all that, this game still isn't that great. It's mostly due to the fact that the battles take significantly longer than in most games in the series, and because of that, this game just kind of feels like a drag to go through still, despite all of its improvements. I did still enjoy it this game though. It wasn't nearly as boring as the first game. This is a decent game, it's just a one and done kind of deal. Soul Hackers 2 is, one of the games Atlas has ever made. Yeah, this game is just such a nothing burger, dog. It's not the worst video game ever made, but it for damn sure isn't a contender for the best megaten game. Everything this game does, other games have done infinitely better in the past. The Sabbath system just feels like a weird combination of Persona's all-out attacks and Strange Journey's demon co-op. The dungeon crawling is extremely bare bones and samey. There are like 3 subway dungeons, and it's made worse by the fact that one song plays for almost all of them. And the Soul Matrix is by far the most boring, tedious, horribly designed, optional dungeon I've ever played in my life. The soundtrack got a few songs that I think are pretty good, but it's otherwise a pretty forgettable OST. The story is alright though, even though there's some parts that make zero sense. The cast is easily the best part about this game though. Arrow is kind of boring, but everyone else is really enjoyable, especially Ringo, who's easily one of my favorite protagonists in the entire franchise. Just such a fun character, all of her lines had me smiling. And in general, the main cast bounces off of each other real well. It's a real shame that everything else about the game isn't as good as the characters. Something that really bothers me about this game though is the name of it. Soul Hackers was the subtitle to the second Devil Summoner game, and now they're acting like it was its own thing entirely. And it's made worse by the fact that when you play the game, it is absolutely nothing like any other Devil Summoner game that came before it at all. And I also cringed every time they said Soul Hack, like, dog, don't do that. This could have very well been its own IP. I feel like they just called it Soul Hackers to try and garner more attention for the game to make it sell better. Wonder how that went. I don't know, I don't really got much to say about this game other than, it is definitely a video game. Oh fuck, I gotta talk about Persona now. Somebody kill me now. Oh well, fuck it dog, let's just rip the band-aid off. Persona 1 I'd put in C. It is definitely not as bad as everyone makes it out to be. There's a lot of good about this game. The dungeons are, for the most part, pretty well designed and fun. The story is on the simpler side, but I feel as though this was the perfect way to start the Persona series. I find it super cool how there's technically 2 stories in one game because of the Snow Queen quest too. And honestly, you know what? Fuck it, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. This game has the best soundtrack in the entire Persona series. On PS1, that is. Yeah, for whatever reason, in the PSP version of the game, Shoji Meguro just took the amazing work of Hidehito Aoki and just came all over it and completely bastardized the soundtrack to try to appeal to the players that got into the series with 3 and 4. Now I am in no way trying to say that Shoji Meguro's work on the modern Persona games is bad. That's simply not true. That's just silly. I think their soundtracks are good for the most part. The reason for that is because it fits those games. The music was there from the very beginning, and the devs were able to craft the soundtrack around the experience. The soundtrack given to the PSP version of Persona 1 does not match the tone of the game whatsoever. Like imagine if the Resident Evil 4 remake came out, but it had a completely new soundtrack that sounded like DMC music. Weird comparison, I know, but you get the idea. Besides the music though, the game does have a few issues that prevent it from being truly great. For starters, the way the party works in this game is, really weird. You have 4 mandatory party members, and you get to choose one of 4 characters to be your 5th party member. But here's the thing, once you choose someone to be your 5th party member, the other 3 just completely fuck off, never to be seen again. Now on one hand this is cool because it allows for a lot of replayability to see each character's reaction to the story and use personas others can't. But on the other hand, that means the 5th party member has no real time to develop because the story has to be written in a way to where you're not missing out on much if you only do one playthrough. But trust me, Persona has a similar problem to this very day, but we'll put a pin on that for now. The battle system has a cool idea going on with its grid-based SRPG type shit, but in execution it goes extremely underutilized. The negotiation system of this game is super tedious too. But by far the worst aspect about the gameplay is without a doubt the XP distribution. In a common sense video game, you kill the enemies and everyone in your party gets a fair share of XP. Not in this game though! XP in this game instead is distributed based on how much a character does in battle. So for example, let's say I have Mark one-shot every enemy with one Megidola. He will get like 80 billion XP at the end of battle, while everyone else will get like 200. Which means there's going to be several points in the journey where you're inevitably going to have to play catch up with your other party members. And the worst part is there is a massive difficulty spike in the last dungeon. When you make it there, you'll be like level 45 max. And the game expects you to be like level 60 or some shit. Now, despite all that complaining I just did though, for some reason, I still have a really positive opinion about this game. Whenever I think about this game, I'm just like, oh yeah, Persona 1, that game's pretty good. It's only when I think deeply about the details when the bad part starts to show its ugly head. Thankfully, despite what I don't like about this game, it's incredibly short. It took me like less than 20 hours to beat. This game is definitely a mess, but the good parts of this game are real good, and it's an important game to this franchise overall. That's why I don't really feel good putting it in D or God forbid E. I am satisfied putting it in C. Well, that was a lot of C tier games in a row. Let's try to be more positive. Persona 2 Innocent Sin goes in B tier. In my original list, I had this game in S, but looking back, I think I just did that because I thought it was so cool for actually playing this game. Like, oh my god, I'm not like the other Persona fans. Realistically though, this game is a solid B tier. This game has some of the best writing and cast of characters in the entire Megami Tensei franchise. It is the heart and soul of the entire experience, and it's why this game is beloved by so many Persona fans. This game's story is kinda fucking insane. Like, I don't want to go into detail because of spoilers, but even if I were to give a spoiler rundown of the plot, I couldn't. It's just that fucking insane. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. The main cast is also incredibly well written and bounces off of each other extremely well. Shout out to my main man Kichi for being the best character in the game, and Tatsuya, but we'll get to him later. The music is also fucking godlike, and unlike Persona 1, I think both the PS1 and PSP soundtracks of this game are equally amazing. And honestly, I just love the visual style of this game. Like, yeah, it's an old PS1 game, but there's something hilariously adorable about the character sprites in this game. And plus, I think 2D characters in a 3D environment ages way better than, say, 3D characters in a 2D environment like Final Fantasy VII. But there is a massive elephant in the room that stops this game from being S tier. I'm of course talking about the gameplay. But honestly, the gameplay isn't inherently bad. On paper, it's actually really good. What the gameplay really suffers from is two big factors: difficulty and pace. For starters, this game has to be hands down the most brain-dead, piss-easy game in the entire Megami Tensei franchise. I played this game on the highest difficulty without fusing a single persona, and I got through the game without any hurdles whatsoever. I shit you not, one time I put a boss on auto battle, went to eat dinner, and when I came back he was fucking dead. So just a PSA, if you're intimidated by how tedious the negotiation system is, you really don't need to interact with it at all. But speaking of tedious, that leads me to my second biggest problem with this game: the overall speed of it. I played both the PS1 and PSP versions of this game, and it didn't matter which one I was playing. This game is just so fucking slow. But the two versions are slow for completely opposite reasons. The battle menu is fast and snappy in the PS1 version, but you can't skip the century-long battle animations, which leads to each battle taking a minimum of like 2 fucking minutes. In the PSP version, you can skip the battle animations, but for whatever reason they made navigating the menu infinitely slower. Not only that, but they simplified the menu too, but to its detriment. Setting up commands in the PSP version takes considerably more time than the PS1 version because of this. I'm not quite sure how to explain it, but here's a clip from Snickety Slice to show you what I mean. like I said, the gameplay itself as a concept isn't bad at all. I kinda like the idea they had going on with the auto battle menu and shit. It just suffers from things outside of its core fundamentals. If these issues were fixed, I could so see myself putting this game in S tier, and that is exactly what they did. Persona 2 Eternal Punishment is an easy S tier. Not only did this game completely fix my two biggest issues with Innocent Sin, but this game is an improvement over the previous one in literally every single way. This has got to be my favorite cast in the entire Persona series. Baofu, Katsuya, and Ulala are characters I just absolutely adore. But I gotta give a huge shout out to my main man Tatsuya, who is my favorite character in the entire Persona series. The characters from Persona 1 even get a chance to the spotlight too. Both Nanjo and Eriko's routes are great, and honestly, this game made me like Kandori so much more. He's so badass in this game. The story is simply amazing. It feels like an epic finale and send-off to the classic Persona trilogy, and the mystery of what's wrong with Tatsuya had me hooked from start to finish. The music is also much better than in Innocent Sin, and I already loved the music of that game. And the gameplay was just absolutely perfected in this game. Battles are now faster and snappier than ever thanks to the fact that the menu speed is significantly higher, and you can skip attack animations, which is awesome. And this game is the exact opposite of Innocent Sin in terms of difficulty. While I stand by my claim that Innocent Sin is the easiest game in the Megami Tensei franchise, Eternal Punishment has to be one of, if not the hardest game in the franchise. This game can and will kick your ass, that's for damn sure. No matter which version of the game you're talking about, Eternal Punishment is one of my favorite games in the franchise. I'm more partial towards the PSP version personally because I find it to be an improvement over the original in every single way, but I find both versions of this game to be absolute masterpieces and it deserves an S tier for that. I would say this is my favorite Persona game, but it is tied with another one. Yeah, Persona 3 Fest goes in S tier. I'm sorry, I know it has a lot of issues, but I just can't help but love this game. This is by far the most pivotal game in the Persona series, as it introduces core mechanics that are still being used to this very day, such as the calendar, social links, and the one more battle system. For me, this is easily the most engaging and immersive game in all of Persona. Most if not all Persona games have silent self-insert characters as the protagonist, but for almost all of them it still feels like I'm taking control of a character, if that makes any sense. Persona 3 is the only game that makes me subscribe to the idea that I'm supposed to be the protagonist, and it's all because of how the gameplay is. The fact that you have to manually traverse the overworld without a submenu, characters can get tired or busy, and your social links can reverse might seem really annoying, but to me it adds a sense of realism that I don't find anywhere else in other Persona games. My favorite part about the gameplay though is easily the combat. Out of all the modern Persona games, this one has the most unique battle system as it's the only one that mandates the use of AI-controlled party members. Now a lot of people like to say that the AI in this game doesn't work and that Mitsuru only uses Martin Karin and shit like that, and to that I say, bitch, what? Did we play the same game? The game offers you a tactics menu which basically lets you narrow down what you want your party to do. And for every playthrough I have done on this game, the characters would do exactly what I want them to do like 90% of the time. That 10% is when Yukari gets stingy with her healing spells. You set them to full assault, they're going to beat the enemy until they're dead. You set them to knockdown, they will do just that. Knock the enemy down and set up for all-out attacks. You set them to heal support, they will literally always heal or use their buffs. Now you're free to not like it, obviously, but for me, the AI really does work if you just use the tactics menu. And it adds to the sense of realism I mentioned earlier because it contextualizes you as the leader of the group. But that leads to another controversial part of Persona 3. Tartarus. Now if you were to ask me what I thought of Tartarus back in 2020 when I first played this game, I probably would have told you that it was the most boring shit ever. But recently I found out about two exploits that genuinely make this game infinitely more fun. The first is useful if you're just trying to progress without running into any enemies. At the very beginning of the floor, split up your party. Because shadows don't spawn unless you move, your party will find the stairs without engaging in a single battle. But the second exploit was shown to me by my friend, and it's pretty badass. Something I didn't realize until he pointed it out is that shadows cannot climb stairs and will stop chasing you if you go up them. Meaning if a shadow spots you, you can avoid being ambushed by leading it to a staircase, then when they turn around, you can get the ambush. I know this sounds like a lot of technical bullshit, but believe me when I tell you, these genuinely turned Tartarus from a boring place I wanted nothing to do with to a place I actually have fun in. Persona 3 has some of the best gameplay in this series for me, but something this game also excels at is its story and characters. Out of the modern Persona trilogy, Persona 3 has by far the best out of all of them. The characters are so well written and well developed, and I like every single one of them. Bring back story-based Second Awakenings, Atlas. And I absolutely love the overall message of this game's story. That death shouldn't be something that brings you down, but rather the ultimate motivator to live life to the fullest in the time we have. And the ending to this game is simply beautiful, and I will never not cry when I see it. But I do have one issue with this game though. Now hear me out, I know you all are gonna hate me, I can already see the dislike coming, but I think this soundtrack is by far the weakest out of all the Persona games. Kind of. It's not that the music is bad on its own. The problem is, despite this game having almost 60 songs, you really only hear like 5 of them. And frankly, they start to get really annoying after a while because of that. Still, if that's the only issue I have with this game, I think it's more than worthy of the S tier. Persona 3 is a masterpiece and is my second favorite video game of all time, and I think all of you have to experience it at least once in your lives. Persona 3 Portable I'd put an A though. Yeah, I used to be such an avid defender of this game. I would always say that this is the definitive way to play Persona 3 and that it's superior to FES in every way. Until I actually played FES and then I was like, oh my god. I get it. But why care, you know what I mean? Why include both versions of this game when I'm only including one version for the other games that have re-releases? Well, that's because the changes made in Portable are much more noticeable and drastic compared to other Atlas re-releases that it deserves to be talked about as its own game. The most notable difference being the presentation. Because of the hardware limitations of the PSP, Persona 3 Portable completely removes animated cutscenes and 3D overworlds in favor of a visual novel style for the former and a point-and-click style for the latter. While I think this style makes the gameplay a lot faster and more convenient, you're missing out on a lot of the immersion that came with the other versions of the game. As for visual novel cutscenes, they don't bother me too much. While it does suck that the anime and in-engine cutscenes are no longer here, I feel as though the script for Persona 3 is good enough to exist on its own. And let's be real here, most of the cutscenes in Persona 3 only amounted to characters just standing around and waving their arms anyway. Though I'm not gonna lie to you, this does kill the impact of a lot of important scenes in the game, especially the October 4th incident and the final boss. But the changes don't end there. Persona 3 Portable came out in 2009, a whole year after Persona 4. Because of this, Persona 3 Portable completely overhauls the gameplay to be closer to Persona 4 than Persona 3. You can now directly control your party members, recovering from a knockdown no longer takes up a turn, you can continue right where you left off in Tartarus, and you won't get tired until after you leave Tartarus. While this all sounds like cool quality of life improvements that make the game more streamlined and easier for newcomers, I feel as though these changes make the game a lot less interesting. This game feels less like an enhanced re-release of Persona 3 and more like a Persona 3 mod for Persona 4, which I'm sure for many that's a good thing. Hell, I even used to think that. But the more I think about it, I just think, if I wanted to play Persona 4, I'll play Persona 4. But the main reason why I put this game lower than FES is because of the XP distribution. I swear, when I replayed these games for this video, I was actually grinding for XP in Portable, when I almost never had to grind in FES. And after I did a side-by-side comparison between the two, Portable's XP distribution is definitely lower than FES. I have zero clue why they did this, but whatever. But the big selling point of this version is the addition of a female protagonist. This is one of the only 5 games in the Megami Tensei franchise that lets you choose the gender of your protagonist. But they went above and beyond with her inclusion. They didn't just change the model of the protagonist and the color of the UI and call it a day. The female protagonist has completely new music, social links, story events, and weapons. Because of that, it almost feels like playing an entirely different game from the male route. Despite the issues I have with this version of the game, it is still Persona 3 at the end of the day, so I'm comfortable with putting it in A tier. This is a really ugly cover they chose for Persona 4. Persona 4 is pretty good. It's not bad. I know this game is beloved by so many Persona fans, but I don't know, I'm not too crazy about this one. For me personally, I find it to be a downgrade from Persona 3 in a lot of ways. While I think the setting of Inaba, the social links, and the soundtrack of this game are the best out of the modern Persona trilogy, everything else is worse than what was in 3. The dungeon floors are much larger and emptier than they were in Persona 3, because that's exactly what we needed after Tartarus, dungeons that are even more boring to play. though to this game's credit, at least each dungeon is aesthetically different. Not to mention they removed the ability to split up your party members into dungeons, which I feel like it would make more sense to have it here than in 3 because of how much bigger the dungeons are in this game. Battle system is good though. Even though I feel like they made it significantly less interesting, you can't go wrong with direct party control. Though rest in peace to Tactics fans, because the AI was nerfed to shit in this game. The story and characters are also a downgrade from what came before it. To this game's credit, I think the cast of Persona 4 bounces off of each other extremely well. I can imagine 2 random sets of characters interacting with each other just fine, whereas in 3 I can't imagine Fuka and Ken ever talking to each other, and in 5 I don't think Yusuke and Haru have ever interacted at all. There's a lot of moments with the cast just chilling out with each other that I really enjoy, even if there are some that are kinda cringe. But the thing is, these characters don't develop in the plot like they do in Persona 3, or any other piece of media. The character development is instead relegated to their social links. You know, the optional mechanic that is near impossible to complete on your first playthrough. Because of this, the characters in the story are written in a way where you don't have to do all the social links. So you just got these characters that are pretty stagnant outside of their individual arcs. There's really no winning with the way this is handled. If you don't finish their social links, you'll never see them develop. If you do finish them, you just realize that their personality in the story is not at all the same as how they are in their social links. I'm not saying the main cast is bad by saying all this. I still enjoy them, especially Kanji and Naoto. It's just unfortunate that this is how character development is handled in this game, when the previous Persona games showed that the writers are fully capable of developing the characters in the plot. But on a more positive note, I think the characters outside of the main cast are great for the most part. Dojima, Nanako, and Adachi are really enjoyable characters both in the plot and in their social links. The social link exclusive characters are great too, like Ebihara, Naoki, and Hisano. The story I would say is one of the stronger aspects of the game. It feels grounded compared to other Persona games, with the plot being a murder mystery in the small rural town of Inaba, which is a very cozy and endearing setting for the game and is probably my favorite setting in the series. The story itself is pretty alright in the beginning, but once you hit the 6th dungeon, it just starts going hard and is one of my favorite arcs in the franchise. While the story didn't have as much of an impact on me like 2 or 3 did, overall, I enjoyed the plot of this game. Persona 4 is just a solid good time. It doesn't do anything crazy amazing, but there's not much I hate about this game either. I chose Golden as my preferred version of this game over the original, but I did so reluctantly. While I don't like any of the new story content added in Golden, it is definitely the better video game to play between the two. Either way, I think I'm satisfied with B tier. I understand that I'm probably going to upset a lot of people because this game has a lot of fans, but it's just personally not really my thing, even though I still enjoy it. Persona 4 Arena is a fun game. I don't really have a lot to say about this one, mainly because I'm just not really big on fighting games. It's not that I think they're bad, I just never got into them that much. So I can't really compare this game to other fighting games. But from my personal experience, this game is really fun, especially with friends. I think Arxis did an incredible job translating the RPG elements from the main games into a fighting game. And I think the character sprites are gorgeous too, but the story is a whole different can of worms. The story mode of the original Persona 4 Arena is a slog to go through because it's literally the same story over and over and over, just with different characters. The one for Ultimax is much better and more streamlined, but it's still kinda boring because they both follow a basic format of like hours of cutscenes and then 1 minute of fighting before more hours of cutscenes. This would be fine if the presentation wasn't so boring. I don't mind the visual novel style too much, but there is so much inner monologue in this game, like dog, I'm not reading all that. Plot itself is alright though. Silly, but alright. The new characters Labris and Sho are also pretty good, though Labris is definitely the better one out of the two. Story aside, this is a fun little game that I really enjoy playing whenever I'm in the mood. Again, not much more to say, it's just good. Persona Q, get the fuck down there, worst Megaten game. I had such a miserable time playing this. For a game which the main selling point is the crossover between Persona 3 and 4, this game is the very definition of wasted potential. The story is actually non-existent until the very end. And when you get to that point, the game just info dumps so much on you and expects you to care, but I just don't at all. Most of this game's runtime is spent with the characters saying so much pointless bullshit to each other for minutes on end with no actual substance. You could cut out like 90% of the interactions of this game and I promise you're missing absolutely nothing. There are also like these social link ish events with the characters you can do, but they amount to literally nothing, both gameplay and story-wise. Speaking of, every character in this game has been dumbed down to one character trait. This is hardly noticeable with the Persona 4 cast because they were already pretty one-note to begin with, but the Persona 3 characters are just completely ruined, especially Akihiko. And the new character Rei is so annoying. She has an incredibly grating voice and she just won't shut the fuck up about food. Zen is chill though. The music of this game has a similar problem to Persona 3, where it has a bunch of songs but you only hear like 3. I swear if I have to hear that fucking corndog song one more time, I'm actually going to go insane. The gameplay doesn't fare much better. The dungeons are all really annoying and tedious to get through it because instead of having actually well thought out puzzles like Strange Journey or Nocturne, they are over-reliant on FOEs, which are overpowered enemies on the map that can move in unpredictable ways, the 4th dungeon of the game being the biggest offender. Another big issue of this game is the combat. Not only is it really slow and extremely easy to run out of SP, all-out attacks are seemingly random in this game, which is extremely weird. But the worst part about all of this is that your reserve party members don't get any XP. Yes, the crossover game with over 26 characters to choose from still makes you grind out every single one of them individually. I did not care to switch up my team because of this. I just had the 2 protagonists, Aigis, Naoto, and Yukari, and just went through the whole game like that, which kind of kills the appeal of having all these characters together if you ask me. I just didn't enjoy this game at all, bro. I found it to be very grating, very boring, very long, and very tedious. When I was playing this game for the first time, I literally wanted to do anything else but play this game. This is without a doubt my least favorite game in the entire franchise. I am never touching this game again. I beat it and that's all that matters. Moving on. Persona 4 Dancing All Night is honestly really good. This is probably my favorite Persona 4 spin-off and my second favorite Persona spin-off overall. Just like with Persona 4 Arena, I'm not very familiar with rhythm games, so I don't know how much better or worse this game is than others. But for me at least, this is an extremely fun and addicting game to play, especially when my fingers just need something to do. The remixes of this game are all amazing too. Some tracks are just good remixes, but some I even prefer to their original counterparts. And we even got songs from Persona 4 Arena and Persona Q, which is pretty sweet. But the surprising thing about this game is that the story is actually pretty fucking good. Yeah, I shit you not, the silly dancing game has a decently competent story. It's obviously not as good as any of the mainline Persona games, and it suffers from the same presentation issues as Arena. But for how stupid of a concept this game is, the story actually does a good job explaining why we're dancing in the first place. Overall, this is a fun little game that I loved playing. This game may seem like a cash grab, but I can tell there is actually a lot of love put into it, and I have a lot of respect for this game for doing something so outlandish yet surprisingly good. The Persona 3 and 5 dancing games on the other hand are going straight to the lowest ranks of the D tier. Literally the only thing saving them from being E is that they're at least still fun to play, but everything else is a direct downgrade from Persona 4 dancing. Most of the remixes of these games are just fucking terrible. There are a few in Persona 3 dancing that I really like, which is why I put it slightly above 5, but there is almost zero songs in Persona 5 dancing that I like. And a lot of these tracks just have AMVs in the background instead of full-on dances, which just comes off as lazy to me. And instead of them trying to do a story like most other Persona spin-offs, they opted to just not have one at all. Instead having these really long and boring social link cutscene things. But the biggest issue about these games is the way they were marketed. When these games came out, they were both full-price $60 releases with day one DLC that totaled $85. Nowadays, this isn't much of a problem, as both of these games go on sale for extremely cheap with Persona 4 Dancing bundled in, which is a pretty good deal if you ask me. But no matter how you see it, these games were solely made to steal your money in broad daylight and nothing more. Atlus still has horrible business practices to this day, but this is by far the worst example of that, and I'm glad these games bombed really hard so that Atlus won't try to pull this stunt again. That's all I really need to say. They're kinda cock compared to Persona 4 Dancing. Persona Q2 is a massive fucking improvement from the first game. Holy shit, so much better. This game addressed a lot of my biggest issues with the original game. The dungeons are much more interesting in their design. FOE puzzles are still here, but they're not the main gimmick of every fucking dungeon this time. All-out attacks are no longer random, which just makes sense. I don't know why they were in the first place. The music is also much more varied this time too, so you're not getting sick of the same 3 tracks over and over. Not to mention that this game has 4 normal battle themes that cycle through, which is pretty sweet. And the story isn't completely non-existent this time and is decently paced. It's absolutely nothing to write home about, but it's at least something. And I find what they did with Katone's character pretty interesting too. But this game still just has inherent Persona Q flaws that prevent it from being a higher tier. Even though we have even more characters this time, your reserve party members still don't get any XP. This is absolutely fucking baffling to me, but thankfully there are actually ways to keep up your characters this time, like sacrificing personas to them, doing side quests, and using essences. But other than that, the battles still feel really slow, the characters are still dumbed down to one character trait, each and every one of them has something worthless to say about everything, and this game still feels like it just goes on for way too long. Still though, this is a marked improvement over the first game in every way. I absolutely fucking dread the idea of revisiting the first game, but I'm okay with giving this one a replay if I really need to. This game is very inoffensive, which is at least more than I can say for the first game. Persona 5 Strikers is easily the best Persona spin-off. I actually really enjoyed this game. There's surprisingly a lot of effort that was put into this game, especially for a Persona spin-off. The gameplay is honestly extremely fun and addicting, and I think Koei Tecmo did a great job translating the turn-based stuff from the main games into an action RPG. Though I feel like this gameplay style would be far better suited for a Raidou game than a Persona game, but that's neither here nor there. I really appreciate how every character feels different too. It keeps the gameplay from getting too old, though some characters are definitely more fun to play than others. The dungeons are all really solid too. The story is also really good for a spin-off. In fact, I might like it a tiny bit more than the original Persona 5. The new characters Sophia and Zenkichi play a big part in that. Even though they're literally just rehashes of Aigis and Dojima respectively, I still enjoy them a lot as characters. Some of the Phantom Thieves get a chance to be in the spotlight again too, like An, Yusuke, and Haru, who definitely needed it. Especially Haru. And the music of this game is absolutely killer, and just like the story, I think I might honestly like it better than the original Persona 5 soundtrack. This game's just got a lot of bangers on deck, bruh. This is probably the Persona spin-off that had the most care and love put into it. There are a lot of people that say that this should be considered the 7th mainline Persona game, and while I disagree personally, I can definitely see where they're coming from. This game's just a really good time, and has definitely earned the title of Best Persona Spin-off. Okay, finally out of Persona spin-off hell, now let's talk about DDS. Digital Devil Saga 1 I would put S tier, and Digital Devil Saga 2 goes in A tier. Now I know that may be really confusing to some of y'all because these are fundamentally the same games, but hear me out for a second. The first Digital Devil Saga, I believe, is an incredible game. From the moment I booted up the game in my PS2, I was instantly hooked and intrigued by the game's world. While the story mostly just serves to set up and foreshadow the second game, I still think this is an incredibly solid story, all things considered. The cast is simply amazing. I love every single character in this game, even the ones that don't have much screen time like Jinana and Bat. The setting for this game is incredibly interesting too, and the absolutely killer soundtrack makes going through the junkyard such a great time. The dungeon crawling and battle system are pretty much identical to Nocturne, and that is not a bad thing. I would never say no to Press Turn. But what makes DDS unique compared to other games in the franchise is that this is the closest to a traditional RPG you're going to get in terms of gameplay. You don't recruit or summon demons in this game like most others. Instead, you have a set party that learns skills through a skill tree system called Mantra, which, in my opinion, is probably the weakest aspect about the game. Not in concept, but just the fact that Mantra grinding can be a little tedious sometimes, though I still prefer it to Magatama grinding in Nocturne. Besides that though, this is one of my favorite games in the franchise. I absolutely loved my time with it. Now, Digital Devil Saga 2, on the other hand, is a different story. I think this game is a massive improvement over the first game in a lot of aspects. I already loved the story, characters, dungeons, and music of the first game, but somehow Digital Devil Saga 2 has it better by a large margin. Just saying right now, this is straight up one of my favorite stories, casts, and soundtracks in the entire franchise. So then why the fuck do I have it in a lower tier than the first game? Well, I won't give any details because of spoilers, and these are games that you absolutely do not want to be spoiled for. But due to story reasons, your characters will rapidly join and leave your party over and over. In fact, you spend like the entire second third of the game without the protagonist. Because of this, it makes it to where when your characters come back in your party after being gone for a while, you're inevitably gonna have to play catch up with them since they can't master any mantras while they're gone. Which means there's quite a bit of grinding in this game. Nothing egregious, but it's enough for me to like it less than the first game despite what I like more in the second game. Either way, these games are amazing and I highly recommend you play them if you haven't already. And yes, play both of them. You are doing yourself a complete disservice by only playing one or the other. Alright, this one might piss a lot of people off. I'd put Devil Survivor in like the highest ranks of the C tier. It is borderline a B. I don't know, bruh. I know this is a fan favorite in the Megaten community, but it just didn't click with me that much. I feel like they did a pretty good job making an SRPG out of the modern SMT formula, and there's even some Persona-esque time management in this game too, except instead of it being day by day, it goes by 30-minute increments. Something really cool about this game is depending on what you spend your time doing, you can either save characters and have them be in your party, or leave them for dead and they will actually die in the story and never return. Like, that is some pretty in-depth stuff. The choices you make in this game really matter more than most, if not all other Megaten games for this reason alone. And of course, this also impacts the ending you get as well. I really loved the idea they had with this game of it taking place during a blackout all across Japan and you and your friends have to survive to live another day. And the cast is pretty good too. Keisuke and Midori suck and Naoya's just an edgelord, but everyone else is good, especially my man Atsuru. But I don't know, everything else I was just kinda meh on. I'm really not a fan of the soundtrack of this game at all. It gets super old super fast. And there is quite a bit of grinding in this game, but not for reasons you might think. The level of your party isn't the issue here. The problem is that Maka is more important in this game than ever, as it serves as your only means of recruiting new demons because of the demon auction system. Not to mention, you're gonna want to use the overpriced compendium a lot if you want to have a good team setup, especially on day 7. And since you get a pitiful amount of Maka per excursion, yeah, you're gonna have to grind quite a bit in this game. And that just killed the whole experience for me. I really like everything else about this game. If it didn't have that grinding issue, I can so see myself putting it in B or even A. But as the game is, I'm just not as crazy about it as most Megaten fans. Devil Survivor 2 I like more than the first game, just enough to warrant it being in its own tier. Now I'll just get my biggest issue with this game out of the way. I am really not fucking with the cast in this game that much. Some are good like Joe and Makoto, but literally everyone else is boring at best or insufferable at worst. Out of the two games, Devil Survivor 1 definitely has the better and more realistic cast. The characters of Devil Survivor 2 are just way too anime cliched in one note for my liking. Another criticism I have is the story. I'm not really saying that it's bad because it really isn't. The problem is it lacks originality. I know like the entire Megaten fanbase says this, but this game really is just Evangelion but SMT. Though if you really think about it, Persona 3 is that too, but don't tell anybody I said that. But other than that, I find this to be an improvement over the first game in a lot of ways. First off, the music of this game is absolutely fucking godlike. I did not like the soundtrack of the first game that much at all, but I find the music of this game to be one of the best in the franchise. The gameplay has also been improved too. Joint skill cracking was a great addition to the game because it allows you to get more chances to learn a skill without having to rely on a specific character to get it. The bosses of this game are also some of the most fun I've had playing Megaten. The ones of the first game weren't all that interesting in design, but in this game each and every one of them has their own unique gimmick to them, and they're all very fun and satisfying to figure out. And I don't know if it's just me, but I found this game to be significantly less grindy than the first one. I still had to do some grinding for the final boss, but overall I found the pacing of this game to be way better. Despite what I don't like about this game, the stuff I do like are really good. Good enough for me to prefer it over the first game, and that's why I feel comfortable putting it in B tier. Catherine is one of my favorite games of all time. It's an easy S tier. I genuinely believe that this is the most unique game Atlus has ever made. The atmosphere being the first thing I always think about when I talk about this game. Despite the entire game only taking place in one tiny bar, the world feels so alive and full and lived in. And the amazing music plays a big part in what makes the atmosphere of this game so memorable too. Every single character in this game is super well written and realistic. I can so see these characters existing as real people in the real world. And that's not just limited to the main cast. The various NPCs you can interact with in this game are all super memorable and well written as well. And if you ask me, that's how you know a game's cast is so good, when even the NPCs are worth talking about. The story of this game kept me on my toes from start to finish, and it really did a good job of making me feel the anxiety anxiety Vincent feels throughout the game. Something I really appreciate about this game is how it talks about relationships in a very mature and serious manner. The alignment system from mainline Shin Megami Tensei makes an appearance in this game. Depending on your actions throughout the game, not only will your ending change, but also Vincent's inner monologue during cutscenes. And the ending you get depending on your choices really says a lot about the person playing it. And just like everything else, the gameplay is also super unique. This is a puzzle game where you climb up a tower as fast as you can by pushing and pulling blocks to reach the end of the nightmare. That sounds really simple on paper, but it's actually super complex and is one of the most fun and addicting gameplay experiences Atlus has ever made. And can you believe that this game was just made to test out the graphics engine for Persona 5? That is kind of hilarious to me for more reasons than one, but anyways. Catherine is an easy S tier. You all owe it to yourselves to try out this absolute masterpiece. The game is super short, only taking around 10 hours to beat, so it's not a huge time investment either. It's a nice short and sweet game that I think everyone should experience. I went with the original version over Full Body for this list because frankly I don't like any of the new content added in Full Body at all. The original will always be the definitive version in my eyes. And last but not least, it's this one. Persona 5. I know I could have talked about this game earlier since I talked about all the other Persona games in their release order, but the reason I save it for last is because out of all of the games on this list, I have by far the most to say about this one. This is the very first Megaten game I have ever played, so naturally it holds a very special place in my heart. However, this is the one game in the franchise that I am most conflicted on what I think about it the most, because depending on how I'm feeling, this game can go anywhere from C to S. Let me start off with the stuff that I'm absolutely positive about. When talking about this game, it is absolutely impossible to not bring up the visual style of this game, and for good reason too. In terms of art direction, Persona 5 has to be the most expressive game in the franchise. Every menu, dialogue portrait, cut-in, text box, you name it, moves with so much animation and it feels like it's actually alive. And the most impressive part about it is, despite how over the top the style is, it is not intrusive or seizure-inducing in the slightest. In fact, this has to be one of the cleanest and easiest menus to navigate in any video game. Another amazing aspect about this game is the gameplay. Persona 5 has, without a shadow of a doubt, the best gameplay in the entire Persona series. The game is admittedly baby easy, but who am I to complain if I'm having so much fun? In terms of gameplay, Persona 5 feels like a celebration of everything that came before it. It has the core mechanics of 3 and 4 like the calendar, social links, and one more battle system, while also bringing back elements from 1 and 2 like guns, demon fights / negotiations, and actual dungeons. Baton Pass is such a simple addition to the game, yet it unironically changes everything, and it is so satisfying when you get to pass the baton to everyone. It is such an amazing and intuitive mechanic that fits seamlessly into the one more battle system, and I hope it's here to stay for future Persona games. Another great addition of this game is Confidant perks. In Persona 4, your party members will learn new abilities depending on their social link rank, but in Persona 5 this applies to every Confidant in the game. Each and every one of them has a unique ability they can teach you, mostly for use in the metaverse. Some are definitely more useful than others, but I like how you have more of an incentive to do social links outside of Arcana Burst. And that concludes the stuff I'm for sure positive of. Now let me get to the stuff I'm either mixed or negative on. First, the music. I don't necessarily think there's any bad tracks in this game, and there's not really any that overstay their welcome either like Persona 3. It's just there's a few songs that I really like and the rest are just kinda there for me, and frankly I'm not a fan of either of the normal battle tracks, though that's probably because I played this game so many times back then. But the main thing I wanted to talk about is the story and characters, which for me has some of the highest highs and lowest lows of the franchise. The characters of Persona 5 have the same problem as Persona 4, where they're relevant for one arc and then the rest of their development is relegated to their optional confidant story. Except I feel like for some characters they're handled worse here than in Persona 4. I really like Ryuji, An, and to an extent Yusuke, but everyone else I'm not a fan of at all. Morgana's really annoying, Makoto feels very inconsistent, and Futaba makes way too many gamer references when she joins the group. Haru is a completely non-existent character but of no fault of her own. And Akechi is just an absolute fucking mess of a character that tries to be way too many things at once. However, just like Persona 4, I also find a lot of the side characters to be genuinely great. Sojiro, Iwai, Takemi, Mishima, and especially Yoshida all have very well written confidant stories that I can give genuine praise for. But the next thing I want to talk about is the story. Persona 5 has hands down one of the best opening arcs I have ever seen in any video game. Never before have I just wanted to beat the fuck out of a fictional character so much in my life. life. This game does such an amazing job making you just fucking hate Kamoshida, especially because people like him very unfortunately exist in the real world. So when you finally send the calling card and hear Life Will Change playing, it is one of the most hype moments I've ever experienced. But then the rest of the plot just fails to live up to the first arc completely and is either okay at best or terrible at worst. The Madarame arc of the game starts off pretty good, but then gets kind of cartoonishly evil when it's revealed that Madarame did some Walter White shit with Yusuke's mother. Not to mention the uncomfortable ass on-sexualization by Ren, Ryuji, and Yusuke. The Kaneshiro arc I really don't remember. The Futaba arc is pretty alright and is a nice callback to Persona 4. The Okumura arc is probably the most insufferable story arc in the entire Persona series, from Morgana's pointless ass temper tantrum alone. And the Sai arc is honestly super cool and actually pretty hype, but then the Shido arc and Yaldabaoth arc, especially the Yaldabaoth arc, feel completely rushed and incredibly predictable, and the ending doesn't fare much better either. If I were talking about the original release of Persona 5, I would probably give this game either an incredibly low B ranking or a high C ranking. But that leads me to my next and final topic, the enhanced re-release version of this game, Persona 5 Royal. Now, I'm pretty sure most of the people watching this have already played this game by now, but just in case you haven't, this is your spoiler warning for Persona 5 Royal. Proceed with caution. With that said, Persona 5 Royal is just a straight upgrade from the original Persona 5. Which is not something I can say about most other Atlus re-releases. Not only did it add quality of life improvements to an already fun game, but it also added new story content that is actually fucking incredible. The new characters Kasumi and Maruki are some of the most compelling and well-written characters in modern Persona, especially Maruki. And Akechi's character has been completely redeemed in my eyes thanks to his newly reworked confidant and his portrayal in the new story arc of the game. I'm just gonna say it flat out. Third Semester is not only my favorite arc in Persona 5, not only my favorite story arc in the Persona series, but my favorite story arc in the Megami Tensei franchise. It's that good to me. For most of the game, you want to take down the rulers of the palaces you go through because they're all scumbags for the most part. But Maruki isn't that at all, not in the slightest. He's a guy with good intentions that wants nothing more than for people to be happy, and it really raises those hard questions of whether or not Maruki is in the wrong for wanting to create a perfect yet stagnant reality. February 2nd is by far the best scene in the game for me. Not only because of the crushing reality of Akechi's fate, but also because of how bittersweet the calling card is compared to how hyped they normally are. All coming together for this epic and emotional finale that still makes me tear up to this day, due in no small part to Billy Kometsu's incredible performance as Maruki. May he rest in peace. Persona 5 Royal's Third Semester is an absolute masterpiece in my eyes, and if the rest of the story was on the same level of quality as it and the Kamoshida arc, Persona 5 would probably be my favorite game of all time. Unfortunately, I just really don't like a lot about this game, and it holds it back from being one of my favorites tremendously. Still though, despite having some of the lowest lows of the franchise, it also has some of the highest highs. And plus, without this game, I wouldn't have gotten into Persona and the larger Megami Tensei franchise, which means I wouldn't have met the amazing friends I know today. So as corny as it sounds, I owe a lot to this game for unironically changing my life. So with everything being taken into consideration, I think Persona 5 belongs in A tier. And that finally concludes my Megami Tensei games tier list. At the time of this recording, Persona 5 Tactica and Persona 3 Reload have not come out yet, so I can't give my opinion on them. But for now, this is my ranking for all the games I've played. I want to make it perfectly clear once again that if you disagree with my opinions, that's completely fine. Just because I don't like something doesn't mean you can't like it. Just like I said, don't be petty about it. And with that, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.